Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, despite signing up to David Cameron's Remain strategy, our new Prime Minister has been navigating the UK's departure from the EU and retaining the union with Scotland, both of these at the centre of her programme for government. The appointment of three key cabinet positions to Brexiteers, Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox, reflects this. A few days before his appointment, the Brexit Secretary set out how he'd proceed with separation from the EU. He said triggering new trade talks were a priority and wanted the UK to negotiate free trade deals with countries such as the USA and India. Mr Davis believes that the UK should not budge on control of our borders, but that tariff-free access to the EU single market is still his preferred outcome. The Brexit Secretary acknowledged that talks with the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Ireland governments would be necessary. And Theresa May made the first step on Thursday, telling Nicola Sturgeon in Edinburgh that she is willing to listen to options on Scotland's future relationship with the European Union. Mrs May said Britain would not rush into Brexit negotiations and would need some time to prepare. However, Mr Davis said that Article 50 should be triggered by the beginning of 2017. That would set the clock ticking and mean Britain would be out of the EU by January 2019 at the latest. We're joined now by the Conservative MP, former Attorney General Dominic Grieve, who campaigned for Remain, and the Labour MP who chaired the Vote Leave campaign, Gisela Stewart. Welcome to you both. Gisela Stewart, three Brexiteers now in the three cabinet jobs most important to Brexit. On that regard, at least, has Mrs May delivered?
I think she has, and I think it was important that she made it very clear that Brexit meant Brexit. We had to put an end to this notion that there was a second referendum in the offing, that we weren't going to implement it, and that required a certainty, both for the country but also in negotiations.
Are you satisfied with that?
I'm completely satisfied with her approach. Yes, it's quite clear that the vote, as expressed in the referendum, has to be respected. We have to take forward a programme for removing the United Kingdom from the EU. Clearly, that's going to be an immensely complicated process, and it also carries with it economic risks, certainly in the short to medium term. So I'm also open-minded as to how one best does that, because I think we're going to have to respond to events as well as trying to shape events. I mean, for instance, we've seen a blueprint published by my friend and colleague David Davis about a sort of British future outside of the EU, which, as far as I'm concerned, is one which I suspect 99.5% of Conservatives would subscribe to.
Well, let me come on to some
of the issues. Let me come on.
We need to unpick this bit by bit. When should we trigger Article 50?
I think you almost need to go like reverse accession process, and the most important thing is trade negotiations. And the problem is, as I understand it, you can't have the bilateral agreement until you have notified, unless you've notified the Article 51. So I think we trigger it when we're ready, and we're ready when it is required to do it in terms of
you must have some idea of the time.
I think the sooner the better.
You think the sooner the better? When do you think we should trigger Article 50?
I think that we should be triggering Article 50 when there is some clarity as to what the scope of the negotiations that will follow will be, and this is the first big hurdle. Clearly, if our European partners don't want to negotiate with us at all, even informally, prior to triggering Article 50, that might present some difficulties. But I can see that from the point of view of the Prime Minister, she'll make up her own mind. Actually getting some clear idea of what it is that the United Kingdom is seeking in terms of a future relationship is going to be very important.
Well, that
before we start
towards the end of the year then, doesn't it?
I think it's impossible to give a particular time frame, but I do agree. I mean, I
agree
with Gisela.
She has to do it. The time frame has to work, but it has to be done in good time for the 2020 election, so you can work back from that.
I certainly think that you can work back from that, but I think that the Prime Minister needs to be given maximum flexibility about this, because boxing herself in to how she goes about what is going to be one of the most difficult political transformations this country has gone through in modern times, I think requires some pragmatism.
Does it require a vote of Parliament to trigger Article 50?
I don't think necessarily, but just come back to some. This is not just about our relationship with the European Union, it's the relationship with the rest of the world. And I think, therefore, that the triggering of Article 50 has also been taken into how our talks with Australia, with China, with India, with all these other countries fares.
But we can talk to them without concluding deals, can't we?
But in terms of the negotiations, I think there comes a point where to make it meaningful, you probably have to trigger. But can I just also...
I want to ask you this. Do we need a vote in Parliament to trigger Article 50?
Oh, we undoubtedly do need a vote in Parliament. It's not just, it's a matter of convention. The idea that a government could take a decision of such massive importance to the United Kingdom without parliamentary approval seems to me to be extremely far-fetched.
Do you agree with that?
It's not about law. It's about
Right.
convention and reality.
Do you agree with that?
I can see the arguments for both sides, but I wouldn't say you absolutely have to do it. But can I just...
No, I want to say, forgive me, we haven't got a lot of time.
No, but I want
Would you vote for triggering Article 50?
Yes, I've always made quite clear that the result of the referendum must mean that we have to be willing to embark on an Article 50 process. I put in one rider to that, which is that it seems to me that any sensible decision has to be made at the time you make it. But that's not a suggestion that I'm going to suddenly decide I won't support triggering Article 50. No. But triggering Article 50 is a very important political step to withdraw from the EU. And I think one has to keep that in mind.
Do you worry that people like Dominic Grieve are actually teeing themselves up to call for a second referendum on the nature of the deal that we will do?
Yes, I do. And I think what we're overlooking is that if there's one thing the European Union is very good at, is that when political necessity is in the interest of both sides, they're very capable of rewriting the rules. So the European Union itself has to look at the problems it faces and the more outward looking, and then what the best deals are. And I think there's a real danger that those who don't like the outcome of the referendum get themselves hooked on Article 15, all kinds of votes, rather than saying there's a new reality out there and we need to deal with that in the best interest of the United Kingdom.
If you could bring it about, you would have a second referendum on the deal, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily. The justification for having a second referendum is if the circumstances that prevail at the time justify it because there is some legitimate question to put to the electorate. I'm always very wary of circumscribing oneself. A referendum is no different from a general election in this sense. It is a statement at the time of what people want in terms of the way policy is taken forward. If people's opinions change, it would be extraordinary in a democracy.
How would you judge that? How would you measure that?
Well, I think the only way in which you can judge that is by looking and listening to what people are saying to you.
But you have to measure it.
Well, opinion polls can measure it.
Well, the opinion
Public
polls
opinion.
that told you your side was going to win in the referendum campaign.
Well, I'm not sure I ever thought that the opinion polls telling me that my side
but
was
they
going
did.
to win. Well,
So
they may have
you
done.
could
but
take
they-
a decision on a second referendum on the basis of polls we already know were flawed.
You are, but so the question is, what is the question that one might be asking? What the public have asked us to do is quite clear. They've given a majority by 1,200,000 people have said, that's such a majority which is not insubstantial, they have said they want a fundamental change to the UK's relationship with the EU, and they see that relationship in future as being one in which we are outside of it. Now, I have to respect that.
Okay, and I have to tell you, we haven't got much time, so I'm going to interrupt you. No, you've had a good say. I need to get Gisela Stewart.
It's a parliamentary democracy, Andrew.
Gisela Stewart. There's a lot of people on the Labour side listening to Dominic Grieve and nodding their heads. Owen Smith, one of the contenders for your leadership, he fundamentally, basically wants a second referendum. Are you going to have to start gearing up for that now? Do you feel that this could be forced on you?
I think that would be the most disastrous step we could take, because both political parties need to look and search why they were so out of step with their electorate, particularly the Labour Party, huge swathe. It's a parliamentary democracy where we get elected to do a job, and that is to either hold the government to account or to be the government. We've asked them, they're reflected. They have done by larger numbers than any government that's here and said we want to leave, and they expect us to get on with the job now.
I'm sorry to have rushed you today, but we have been very short of time. I thank you both.
I've been getting away with it.